Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Ciamacca, and I'm on the steering committee for ChangePA. And just want to tell you a little bit about ChangePA for those of you who don't know what this organization is. ChangePA is dedicated to electing progressive candidates to the Pennsylvania State House. I became intimately involved with ChangePA back in 2020 when I ran for the State House. And they were just about the most important supporter of mine when I ran in Delaware County back in 2020. They gave me $35,000 at a time when I was raising donations $100 at a time. And you may ask, why is that important? It's important because if we want our candidates out there talking to people, knocking on doors, and making sure that they're doing the hard work of campaigning, they need to be meeting with constituents and not being on the phone asking for dollars. So first thing I will say is anything you can do to support the great candidates we have here tonight would be much, much appreciated. This group of candidates is part of our ChangePA candidate cohort. And what that is it's a new endeavor, actually not that new, I would say. We did it in 2020, we did it in 22, and we did it we are doing it in 24. We get candidates across the state together every 2 weeks, and we talk about the hard questions of what it's like to run for office. So we meet, we bring in speakers sometimes, and we talk to candidates. And truthfully, as a former candidate, I think the best part about it is you get to commiserate with other people who are doing this really hard thing called running for office. Having been a government and a politics teacher in high school, I used to talk about what it's like to run for office, but until you do it, you don't realize how hard it is. It really takes over your entire life. And most of these people that we are supporting in this candidate cohort have never run before. So it's trying to, to build a plane as you're beginning to fly it. And it's just a very difficult endeavor. So I am so grateful to the people that we have here tonight who are running for office, and they are running for office all over the state. We actually have 14 members of the candidate cohort, but tonight we have 6 of them here with us tonight. So I'd like to briefly introduce them. We have Cristian Luna, we have Eleanor Breslin, we have Megan Kocher, we have Meriam Sabih, we have Stefanie Rafes, and we have Brad Chambers. And what I've asked them to do so that you can meet them individually is to talk a little bit about who they are, why they're running for office, and why they're going to win their seat. And one little caveat I will say before I turn this over to them. If you may have noticed this, that the Harris campaign considers these down ballot races so important that yesterday they took $25 million of the money that the Harris campaign has, and they gave some of it to the congressional campaigns, some of it to the Senate campaigns, and some of it to these very candidates that you are going to see here tonight. And why are they doing that? Because they know what we know. If these candidates get out there and hit the doors, they are going to engender support for the Harris ticket. So they are going to drive people out to the polls and out to vote because they're out there talking about running for office. So I think the least we can do is support them and make sure that we're giving them a few dollars so they can get out there and win these races. So I will say Tom's going to put a link in the chat for you to contribute if you are so inclined. Also, if you have any questions, we will not take questions during the event. At the end, we'll be looking at your questions and we'll ask some of those questions to our candidates. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our candidates. And I'm just going to ask you candidates if you could just give us a brief introduction. So I'll start with Cristian Luna, who's running in Southern Chester County. Cristian, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you, ChangePA. Thank you for including me on the candidate court roll call. That does help, especially being a first-time candidate. I am 27 years old, so I am a Gen Z candidate running in Southern Chester County. I am also Mexican American, so I'm a first generation Mexican American citizen here. I got into this after working 3 years with domestic violence survivors for a nonprofit and now for the county of Chester. And my first time I could vote was 2016. So that after that election, I realized, okay, like I need to be involved, I need to be off the sidelines. And this race was one that I said, you know what, we'll tackle it and we'll get it done. There's so much on the line in November when it comes to reproductive rights and women's rights, just raising the minimum wage. Today there was a school shooting, and Pennsylvania needs to pass real gun reform and some red flag laws. My opponent would never do that, and it's sad. And then there's local issues going on. The Chester Water Authority is under attack by Aquila. A private corporation wants to use our municipal water system for our exploitation and their benefit. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to join this fight. We're also in a healthcare desert, and I want to bring back healthcare services. So my team and I, we've been working every day, knocking doors, making phone calls. As she said, we're dialing for dollars all the time. So when we get bigger donations, it helps relieve some of that. Today I went out and I knocked about 75 doors before I came on this call with you guys. But we're tackling it. We're on the ground constantly. And my community agrees with me. It's time for change, and they're ready to elect a Democratic candidate here.
Well, thanks, Cristian. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk more with you after we've talked to these other candidates. Eleanor Breslin, you're running in Bucks County. Would you like to talk a little bit about why you're running and a little bit about your campaign?
Yes, thank you. And again, I join Cristian in just expressing my appreciation for ChangePA, for the cohort group, and for being kind of showcased here this evening. So my name is Eleanor Breslin. I'm running for state representative in the 143rd district, which is in Upper Bucks County. It's the district that sits above Doylestown. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for the past 20 years, most recently doing environmental litigation for Clean Air Council, fighting for all of our right to breathe clean air. I'm running for state representative because I have 3 school-age children. I have boy-girl twins who are 12 and my older daughter's 14. And when I think about them and their future and the future for their generation, I'm really, really worried for the same reasons that I'm sure all of you are worried for when you think about the younger loved ones that you have in your life. We have women's rights are under threat. Nobody's really taking climate change seriously. We have a housing crisis, kind of you name it. So I believe I have relevant skills to bring to Harrisburg and to be a part of making that change to improve the future for the next generation. This district is definitely flippable, and it is flippable this year. It is trending blue in 2023. 2 of the 3 school boards within the State House district flipped from red to blue majority. And I can feel it as I'm knocking on doors. Like every other candidate here, that's part of what I'm doing every day. I am closing in on having personally knocked 4,000 doors. I'll probably get there by lunchtime on Friday, since the end of April. And when I'm knocking, I'm only knocking on Republican and independent doors because my path to winning is through persuasion. I need to be talking to, not the Democrats. But what is fascinating is when I look at my persuasion rate, I am 75%. When I'm speaking, when I have an opportunity to speak with voters, 75% of the time, they're telling me that they will support me. And raising money at this stage is so crucial because it helps me, through paid communications, reach the voters whose doors I haven't yet gotten to. So thank you for all of your support. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Eleanor. I really appreciate it. We'll hear more from you in a very, very little bit of time. Next up, we have Megan Kocher.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Kocher. I am running for state representative in Pennsylvania's 119th district in Luzerne County. So there are so many reasons that, let me backtrack. Thank you for having me here today. I'm also very grateful to be part of the candidates cohort. I'm also a first-time candidate, so that's been really helpful for me. I'm 25 years old, and I'm actually running against somebody who's even a little bit younger than me. So my race is really interesting in that way. I'm challenging a freshman incumbent, but I'm still running for a lot of the same reasons that other people here are running for. My opponent has vowed to take on the woke DEP because they're woke and has a 100% pro-life rating. So I decided to run because I realized that the government isn't really working for average families like myself and the average family in 119. I come from a background on field campaigns. I've been a field director with the Democratic Party, and I've been a field director with groups like For Our Future Pennsylvania. So I looked at the numbers for this district and I said, this is a district that I know for a fact with a strong field campaign, I can win. So calls, texts, doors are, just like everyone else, really all I do anymore. The numbers are really looking good for us as well. In our persuasion universe, people that we really don't expect to vote Democrat without a little bit of push, about 50% of them are leaning or strong supporters for me, and about 45% of them are undecided so far. So we have a really great shot at winning my district, and I'm really grateful to be here today to talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. I mean, and just to emphasize this, Megan is 25 years old. She's the youngest person running for the state house in Pennsylvania. And she's working super hard, just like our other candidates. And we really appreciate her being out there, working so hard, not just for herself, but everyone up ballot to make sure that they win also. So thanks, Megan. Next, we have Meriam Sabih.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for ChangePA, the cohort and the friendships, the bonds that we've made have been so helpful through this process. I'm also a first-time candidate. I've been a long-time community organizer, a volunteer. So I believe in showing up. I believe in being there for my neighbors, for my community, and serving with compassion and listening. So I also know what it means to grow up in a one-bedroom apartment. My parents worked really hard to put food on the table. I know what our hardworking families are going through, struggling. And I have 3 kids. I'm a mom, so I have 3 kids. We just dropped off my eldest to university at Penn State. And I want to make sure that my children are able to afford a home when they graduate from college, which isn't looking, very, very great. So I would do everything I can to lower the cost of living for our hardworking families, to listen, to work together, to be a sensible, compassionate voice in Harrisburg. Of course, women's reproductive rights are on the ballot. My opponent has voted against reproductive freedom with no exceptions. She's voted for mandatory funerals for fetal remains with no options for families to opt out of them. She's voted against funding our public schools. I've been endorsed by PSEA, the Public School Education Association, which is a huge honor for me. So I care very much about funding our public schools, defending our democracy. My opponent also wanted to overthrow the elections in Pennsylvania. So I'm getting a really great response at the doors because the average person does not know that my opponent has voted these very extreme votes. Of course, my opponent tries to portray, that she's for common sense, but none of those things are common sense. So when people get to know that this is what their state representative is voting for, they're pretty appalled. I've had Republican women say, that they've said, are you accepting contributions? Because I want to contribute to your campaign. And I've had other women say, you know, our generation fought for reproductive rights. So we're getting a really good response at the doors. It's almost been, it has been heartwarming. So, and like Debra also said, we are so grateful for the support and for the funds, which are so needed. It does help us get to the doors and have these very crucial conversations. And it will also help my campaign put out mailers and get our message across. We need the voters in my district to know that this is what their state representative is voting for, and that I promise to be a compassionate, sensible voice that will listen and work together.
Thank you so much, Meriam. Appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you for running. Really appreciate that also. Stefanie, Rafes. I believe did I pronounce that correctly, Stefanie?
Yeah,
I
that was
just thinking
perfect.
about that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'm Stefanie Rafes. I am running in the 187th district, which is in the western part of Lehigh County. I am in my mid-40s. I am a healthcare provider. I am a cardiology physician assistant, and I'm also a breast cancer survivor. So I was diagnosed at 33, and the Affordable Care Act literally saved my life. At the time, I didn't have employer-sponsored health insurance, and with a cancer diagnosis, trying to get coverage would have been nearly impossible. My own father had some medical issues as well, and he ended up having to file medical bankruptcy. And these things should not be so commonplace in, you know, one of the wealthiest nations in the world. So we need work on affordable healthcare. The first time I ever considered running for office was in the beginning of the pandemic, when so much misinformation was proliferating with very little resistance and actually coming from our federal government. It made me realize that we need more people in government with backgrounds in healthcare and who understand science. I'm extremely pro-choice. So in 22, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, again, it was in my mind, if the Supreme Court is going to be tossing back major decisions to the states, I want to make sure here in Pennsylvania, at least, people's rights are protected. And gun violence, again, we had several major school shootings since the Nashville school shooting. That actually was the moment that I decided I'm going to do this. And nothing has changed for the better at all. My path to winning, also, like other people have mentioned, is through persuasion. This district used to be extremely conservative. It's now, after redistricting, a very purple district. It's about half suburban and then half pretty rural. And what I'm finding is similar to what Eleanor said. About 75% of our persuasion universe is at least open to voting for me. And when I have conversations, I mean, it's a very diverse group of residents from the suburbs up to the farmlands. So their values and their needs and what's important to them are going to be very different. But people are very complex, and they don't always fall, you know, if they're a Democrat, they think this way. If they're a Republican, they think this way. I'm finding a lot of mixed values. So people who really are passionate about the environment, but they are very pro Second Amendment. People who are really fiscally conservative, but they're pro-choice. So having even a 5-minute conversation where you can just look people in the eye and get to know each other for a few minutes, it makes a huge difference. So right now we're like deep canvassing in the boonies and it's actually going really well. I am really encouraged by the conversations at the doors. No one has slammed the door in my face or told me to get out. So it's been positive so far.
Thanks, Stephanie. Really appreciate you and what you're doing. I know how hard you're working, so keep up the good work. Really appreciate it. And finally, but not last but not least, Brad Chambers. Love to hear from you and what's going on with your campaign.
Hello. First, I want to say thank you to ChangePA. This is it can be a lonely process, but that validation that you get from coming to this means so much. You feel like you have a friend in the fight, and you feel like you have a support system, and that's not to be understated. I'm Brad Chambers, and I am running to represent the 41st district, which is in Lancaster County, and I am by day a labor administrator. So what that means is my job is to ensure that about 5,000 union workers get paid what they're supposed to at the end of the pay period, that they get their necessary certification premiums. I think that's incredibly important because collective bargaining is one of the hallmarks of this country. And I am incredibly blessed to have so much labor support on my campaign. They have made sure that I'm able to do this, and they have been my wings in this process. And I want to give back to them this year. My district is incredibly winnable, and that's how I'm going to do that. It was redistricted in 2022. Since then, Democrats have been winning here. Josh Shapiro won my district by 55.6%. And as of the recent polls that were done 2 months ago, he polls at 60% in my district. The county commissioner candidates, the Democratic county commissioner candidates, they also won my district last year over the Republican candidates. So by the numbers, it is one of the most flippable races in the state of Pennsylvania. And I am on the cusp of turning my county purple for the first time in history. I want to be the one to do that because it'll allow me to fight for policies that would meaningfully improve people's lives all across the state, such as fairly funding our public schools, affordable housing, affordable healthcare. I would like a public option, single payer healthcare. Stefanie Rafes' story was I've experienced similar things, and that should never be the case for anyone. So I do think we need single payer healthcare here. And I would like to be the one to show people that you can have candidates that are going to improve quality of life, that is their main focus. My opponent is pretty much the opposite of me on all these issues. He is anti-choice. He is anti-fair funding for public schools. He's anti-environment, and he does not even really believe in your right to a fairly run election, as he has said that his election was fairly run, but the presidential was not. So he's one of the elected officials in Lancaster County who refused to ratify the previous presidential election results. And I come from a hardworking single-family background. I am in this to the hilt. I'm going out every day. I'm raising the money. I'm doing the work. I'm sure all of you know about that, but I would love to get all of your support in this because your support would allow me to stay off of call time and stay on the doors because he's an incumbent and I am a challenger and I am down 4 points from him. It's a field difference. It's just do you hit the doors or not? That's what we're talking about here. And I hope that we all do it this year. I think we all can do it this year. There's a lot of energy with the Kamala campaign. We need to capitalize on that. And we need to show people what real progressive change looks like in the state of Pennsylvania.
Thanks so much, Brad. Thanks for that energy and that passion. And I want to just play off of something that Brad talked about, which is we have a real chance to flip these seats. If you remember 2018, we were lifted up, in the midterms and in the state rep races, and the environment that you run in is so critical. We elected a record number of women back in 2018. In 2022, after the Dobbs decision, that decision and the end of Roe v. Wade lifted us again so that we took the Pennsylvania House for the first time in many, many years. But we are right on the cusp here. We only have a 1-seat majority, barely that. And if the Republicans maintain a majority or get a majority in the State House, they will be able to pass a constitutional amendment banning abortion in Pennsylvania and taking away women's reproductive rights. And we've seen that happen in other states. So every one of these races is critical. And I'm trying to convey to you the passion that I see in these candidates. They are out there every single day. Having done this in the heat, in the cold, in the rain, this is a lot of work. And most of these people are working a job. Some have families. This is democracy on the line, and they're doing it for you and for your kids and for their kids. So please, if you can give money to these candidates through ChangePA, we would really, really appreciate it. We do want to talk and have a few more discussions with these candidates. One of the things I think is very, very interesting that most people who've never knocked doors don't really know about is, what's it like to knock a door? And if you have any stories, I mean, I just knocked doors over the weekend, and I gotta say, it is an experience to do that. You will talk to some crazy people, and you'll hear some things at the doors that you're not hearing on TV. So I'm going to throw this out to all our candidates. Do you have a memorable door knock that will give people a sense of what it's like to knock doors out there in Pennsylvania? And any one of you can just chime in.
So I'll go first because this one still sits with me. It was actually the day that Biden announced he was stepping down. It was two Trump supporters. And it wasn't my hard persuasion, it was a lean persuasion. They told me, they actually invited me into their home, which I'm always very hesitant to do. But she was very welcoming. So I took a step in and I spoke with her and her husband about just this election. They were shocked to see Biden step down, that they were full Trump supporters, and they wanted to see who was going to be at the top of the ticket for the Democrats. And then I just talked to her about just local issues. One thing that she told me was the environment and climate and taking care of our ecosystems out here. And I just told her my stances on all this. And she said, you know what, I will vote for you. And hearing this MAGA supporter, she was hard R. She had a Trump flag in her house. And she said, you know what, I will give you a chance and I will vote for you for the state house race. That to me resonates a lot because the issues that we face at the state level, they impact us all. And so that is always a story I lean on.
I think that's really important, Cristian, having knocked on doors from and knocked on that persuasion universe. Sometimes you feel like it's hopeless. And when you get someone who actually says they'll vote for you, you just said that, like, if you internalize that, that's the kind of thing that keeps you going. Because it's a lonely road out there when you're knocking doors and talking to people who oftentimes are not going to support you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
that.
She's an HOA member, so she said she was going to work her connections in the neighborhood for me. She was so willing to volunteer her time for my campaign, and that to me was like, it's worth it to be out there and say, you know what, we're going to reach across the aisle and let them know that we can create change out here.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Anyone else from our candidates have a good door knocking anecdote? To see
I
Megan.
have one.
Yeah.
You could go first. Steph.
Oh, thanks, Megan. So this just happened yesterday in our one of the rural precincts. I saw on my app, it was a registered Republican woman, I think in her 50s or 60s. She opens the door and she has like two dangly cross earrings on, and I'm like, oh, she's never going to vote for me. And I asked her like what her top issues going into the elections this year are, and she said women's reproductive rights. I was like shocked, but you never know what the person's going to say, what they care about. Some people have kept their registration for their entire life, but they don't really vote that way anymore. So you really have no idea. And it's extremely worth attempting to have a conversation with as many voters as you can. You'll be very surprised.
And I think you highlight something which Christian highlighted too, is if you have the opportunity to knock doors instead of asking for money, right? That's what this extra money does for you. It gives you the opportunity to be out there and switch that person and potentially get them not just to vote for you, but to vote for Harris and Bob Casey and, you know, Democratic candidates up and down the ballot, because I think they see you as a real person, which I think
Yeah.
you make a connection. So
Yeah. And my opponent, even though he's not our current representative, he got primaried out 2 years ago. He was the state representative for this area. So if his name comes up, I constantly get an eye roll, or they'll just say, well, I'm really glad you came by because I don't want to vote for him again. So like
that's terrific.
the conversations are so important.
Great story. Megan, I think you were up next.
Yeah, so and I know I said this in, I think the last or the cohort meeting before that, so it's going to be a repeat for some people here. But I wanted to talk about something that happened while I was knocking doors with somebody who wasn't on my list and actually kind of canvassed me. So I was knocking in my persuasion universe, and I had just had a really great conversation with somebody who wasn't on my list. And I checked him out later, and his Democratic support score was like a 4. And I got to the next door, and a car like really quickly pulled up on the side of the road. And I was like, what is going to happen here? And this younger gentleman yelled out the window, like, are you with Megan Kocher? And I was like, yeah, I am Megan Kocher, actually. And he was like, fantastic. Like, I'm a first time voter. My parents are really big Ring Cabbage supporters, my opponent. And he was like, but you know, I met him at the Pierogi Fest, and I really don't know what to do. Like, are you willing to tell me about some of your issues? And he told me he's a registered Republican, but he really just doesn't know where he stands. And we stood in, you know, the road for 20-25 minutes just talking about the election and my views. And now he sends me a text message whenever he sees one of my signs. He'll take a picture of it and text me and be like, "Hey, just saw another sign." And he's like, "I'm working on my parents slowly." He texted me his address. He's like, "I think you should come canvass my parents and at least get them to take down their sign for him." So I'm gonna try to canvass his parents next. But that was an interaction that I never expected somebody to stop me to talk about the race. So that was really cool.
That's awesome, Megan, especially when, like I said, it's a lonely road out there knocking on doors all day. And when something positive like that happens, it's so important. And I'll just make a side note here. I don't know if you mind me sharing this, Megan, but Megan's a wrestling champion, right? So the good news is no one's going to mess with Megan at the doors, because literally, I guess you give them the takedown. I don't know, right? Right, Megan?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say champion, but I was the when I wrestled, we didn't have girls teams yet. So I was the first girl to win a district wrestling match in my area. So a lot of times I knock on doors and people are like, I think I know you from somewhere. Did I see a commercial about you? And I'm like, oh no. You saw the article when I, you know, won that match in districts like in 2016.
Well, I just think it's a great to bring that up, only because it shows, you know, like you're a real person and you have a real background, and, you know, you've never done this before, and you're willing to put yourself out there, just like you put yourself out there on the wrestling match.
Thank
So
you.
I don't know if Brad or Meriam might have
I've
a
got one.
story.
Yeah. So I was canvassing a Republican, and she was immediately dismissive of me at first, and at one point had told me to leave her premises, but had walked that back when I started talking about, you know, things that were going on in the community. She said that her biggest issue was crime and lack of investment in resources in our community, and that she's a Republican. And I was explaining to her I was pivoting away from Trump, because I think like once you encounter kind of a roadblock, what you need to do, because it's a bit of a dance, you just pivot into something that you can both agree on. And she started to realize that everything that she had a problem with was the status quo. She didn't like that, you know, groceries were so high. She didn't like that the communities were going downhill, that there wasn't investment in them. And I said, you know, my opponent's been in office for 10 years. Isn't that his fault? And then she thought to herself for a second. And, you know, when you attack the status quo, she had to agree with me. And we ended up leaving the conversation with her saying that she is going to vote for me, which was kind of indicating.
That's a great story, and I think what it also shows is, I mean, one of the things that Kamala Harris, I think, has given you all and like the whole state is the idea of change. And I love President Biden. I think one of the great things that he's done is to, as he said, is to bring Kamala Harris on board. I think just by the very nature of her being in the race, she amplifies, even though she's part of the current administration, the desire for change in the country and putting a new face forward. And seeing you all here as a bunch of new faces who are willing to put yourself out there, I think that the Harris campaign is lifting all of you in your campaigns. And I've seen just in my anecdotally in Delaware County, just an unbelievable amount of enthusiasm. So I hope that's carrying forward to your campaigns also. Meriam, I don't know if you have any stories that you want to relate.
I have many, but one that's very interesting is I was at a door. The husband was not on my list. He was very hardcore Republican, but his wife was. But while I was, asking to talk to his wife, he was receptive to talking to me, and he's like, you're the first Democrat who's ever knocked on my door, so I respect you for doing this. And he was talking to me for a while. His wife came out with a newborn baby, and she's like, she had just, she was an IVF mom. So she's like, this election, I'm on board. I'm going to vote for you. If the abortion bans were in effect in Pennsylvania, she said she would not have been able to get rid of two embryos. One which would have been disabled, the other one she would have miscarried. So she said reproductive rights is really important to her. Her husband seemed like he's receptive to thinking about it. And then in the same on the same road, there was a neighbor who also wasn't on my list, but she's like, I heard you talking to my neighbors, and the way that you spoke and presented your, the way you spoke and talked to them, she thought it was crazy that my opponent voted for mandatory funerals for fetal remains with no options to opt out. So she's like, that sounds crazy to me, and I will vote for you as well. And then one other quick story. Yesterday, I accidentally knocked on someone's door. I meant to knock on their neighbor's door. But I started saying I realized I was at the wrong door, but I continued because she was receptive and she was a Republican. And she was like, I have 2 daughters. So what you're saying makes sense to me. I do care about their future. Also, I was telling her about lowering the cost of living, having our kids afford homes, and that all sounded good to her. So she was like, I'm glad you accidentally knocked on my door. Yeah, so those are my
Meriam, I mean, sometimes the accidental encounters are the ones that are the most meaningful. I found that when I ran, several years ago, and thanks for relating that story. I don't want to put you all on the spot, but I know that some of you talked briefly about this, but running for office has been a sacrifice for many of you. And I know that I've heard some of your stories about what it's, what the challenges that you've faced. And I just wonder if you could share with people, what you have put on the line here to run for office. That can be, your personal sacrifice, monetary sacrifice. What have you sacrificed to run for office? And I don't know if Eleanor, if you are still on the line here. I think I forgot you on the anecdote. So
That's okay. I have a good anecdote.
yeah, I'll tell you what, if you could do both, you could do the
Okay.
anecdote and the
Yeah.
sacrifice, that'd be great.
Okay. So in terms of the sacrifice, it's you almost can't appreciate it until you're living it day after day after day. When I decided to run, I took a part-time leave of absence, unpaid, from my job with Clean Air Council. And then in the beginning of May, I've been on a complete unpaid leave of absence because I've been campaigning full time. As I said, I have 3 school-age children. I also have a husband, and it's just, you know, when I'm not available, there's a shift in everything else that I do in the house, and you know, I'm super fortunate to have a willing partner, but it doesn't mean that every day is rosy. It's been pretty bumpy. I also have 2, my parents, my dad's 89, my mom's 77. They live in assisted living nearby. I have 2 siblings, but I'm the main, you know, I'm the one who's there all the time, tending to them. So, you know, it's a lot. I'm also a supervisor in my township. So my husband can't wait for me to start earning money for the family again. But in terms of the anecdote, I was knocking with my son on Saturday or Sunday, and we were in a list where we were driving from driveway to driveway. And I think it was Stefanie who commented about the earrings of the woman who answered the door. And as a door knocker, as you're approaching the house, you're scanning everything for clues as to what might this conversation be like. What are the cars in the driveway? Is the garden a wreck, or is everything in place? And all the decorations on the porch, you're just taking it all in. So my son and I, we come upon this driveway, and it is a shared driveway for 2 properties. One is on my list, and there is a yard sign for my opponent at the driveway. So there was like a 50% chance it was for the other house that wasn't on my list. So we kind of debated, and we decided we would go. And it turns out it was the yard sign for the house that was on my list. But it wasn't the owner's, like, it was the owner's niece who put the yard sign out. He doesn't know anything about labs. We had a long conversation in his driveway, and I asked him if he would put one of my signs out, and I had one in the car. So now there's a house that has both of our signs out front, which is kind of ridiculous.
That's a
But
great story.
you really don't know what the interaction could be. And, you know, many times it's really fabulous. So.
And I will say that a lot of times people have, I mean, I hate to say this because I spent so much time running for state rep. Most people don't even know what state rep it means. They think you're running for Congress, or they think, you know, I mean, really, they don't know. So you have to explain to them, and maybe this guy didn't even understand, you know, who was running for what. And that's why it's so critical to have people like you, the actual candidates out there, explaining to people what this office is and what it means to individuals at the local level. Well, thanks, Eleanor. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the sacrifice that you're making. I know it's a lot. So I'll ask, maybe I'll just go down the row here. Cristian, what sacrifices have you made to run for this office? Is Cristian there? Maybe I'll skip over and go to Brad.
Okay, where do we start? So, I mean, I'm sure we've all made a lot of sacrifices, but one of the things that I try to do is have team dinners. I've got a very large campaign team, or at least for State House. I had 5 interns at one point, and I've got a former Shapiro staffer who is running my L2 program. She's really great. Diane Bates, if maybe some of you know her, but I think that it's on me as the candidate to set the table for the campaign, to set the pace, to set the vibe. And my vibe is jovial, it's warm. So I invest a lot of money in making sure that people have snacks and whatnot when they come to my house, and that we go out and that we kind of form a bond. And I do everything that I can when I'm not working my job. Unfortunately, I'm not financially able to take a leave of absence. So I do things like do call time on my lunch break. And, you know, at one point I thought I was going to get fired from my job for running my campaign, which I would have accepted. but doesn't seem to be the case anymore, which is good because I don't know what I would have done under those circumstances. But yeah, so it's pretty much you get off of work and then you go back to work. But I know that you all know about that, so I'm not going to wax too much about that. But yes, it is the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks. It's
Yeah.
a 24-hour-a-day job, and like I said, I'm not asking for a situation where we say, like, I know a lot of you are working hard too. I just think most people have no idea what it's like to run for office, and by you giving these stories and telling them, I think it makes it more real for people. So thanks for that, Brad. Megan, what's it like to run for office, and what sacrifices have you made?
Yeah, I feel like it would be easier to list the areas where you don't have to make sacrifices. I was working full-time on field campaigns, and now I'm working 15 hours a week. I still thankfully have a job that I really like to do, but I know that I really shifted from this, like really cool career trajectory to just entirely putting my career on hold for a year. And in the campaign space, I don't know what that's going to mean for potentially getting another role in the future. I was working on my master's degree, and I actually had surgery. I had a melanoma. It was removed, like everything's fine, but it just became too much to handle, and I had to put my master's degree on hold. Sometimes I don't go on my daily walks with my dogs, and we have a fenced-in yard. It's fine, but that was previously the thing I looked forward to most at the end of the day. So yeah, I feel like in every way it's this give and take of, my husband and I really only texted this day because we were both knocking doors in different places. And then the only thing we texted about was the good or the bad conversations that we had. But I also feel like in running, like I said, everything's a give and take. So I also made so many awesome relationships along the way that have kind of been able to help support that. And our ChangePA call, I know last week we kind of dove into that, and that was really helpful for me. So
Thanks, Megan. Stefanie, what has this campaign meant for you and your sacrifices?
Yeah, so I do not have kids or a husband, which in this situation seems like a privilege. So I don't have, those major responsibilities, but I am a homeowner. I have 2 animals. So everything that comes along with, maintaining a home, pets, I have to do that all by myself. I also still have to work because that's the only way I can pay my bills, but I've had to cut down to the barest bones of schedule that I can still afford to pay my bills, but have enough time to campaign. And then, assuming that I win this election, I don't know where my political career will go, but I might be, ending or pretty much ending a 21-year career as a PA, which is really scary to think about. And if I'm in the political world a certain number of years and then I want to go back to being a PA, I don't know if I'll be able to find a job like that. That's a scary unknown for me. But at the same time, my life has never gone the way I was expecting, and it's always been okay. So I know going forward, whatever happens, I'm going to be fine. But, change is always scary. And it's definitely a risk. Like, we're all putting ourselves out there and not knowing what the outcome is going to be.
And I think you make an important point. Running for office is like taking a big step into the dark unknown. You really don't know, and people can't really explain to you. I know I went to a bunch of different classes, and they try to explain to you what it's like, but until you're doing it yourself, you just don't know what it's like. And a lot of people are giving up careers. If you win, it's great, but like you say, you had a career before this, and we're gonna hope that you win, and then we'll think about the PA job afterward. So, and Meriam, what sacrifices have you made?
I am a journalist as well, community organizer, but I am doing this campaigning full time, so I've kind of put everything on hold. I am a mom, a busy mom. So my son, as I mentioned earlier, he's my firstborn and we dropped him off to college. I have two other younger ones, one in middle school, one in the high school. So we've had to sacrifice a lot of family time, of course. We did not go on summer vacations. We didn't do a lot of things that we normally do. I also have my parents, my mom, who is she is suffering from stage 4 lung cancer. So I also at times she comes over, we take care of her as well. I haven't been able to spend as much time with her as, of course, that I would like, but I'm hoping, she continues to do well. And also, it is scary putting ourselves out there. There was that shooting that happened with the Trump, at the rally, where we were literally told to stop canvassing for a few days because it was scary to be out at the doors and we weren't able to go to our heart persuasion just in case somebody, does a counterattack or people are angry. So the physical sacrifice, physical danger, potentially, God forbid, but also putting yourself out there in terms of your reputation, your, all of that, because I'm not used to people, saying negative things about me or seeing anything negative about myself, as far-fetched as it may be, but my opponent is testing negative messages against me. So that's a big thing that it could, potentially affect me and my family. And so it is a huge sacrifice.
Thanks, Meriam. Thanks for all you're doing to run for office. I know my own family was concerned because what happens is, they run negative ads about you. And I can remember vividly my own mother calling me up and crying because she saw a television ad that was so awful about me. And, no one likes having their name dragged through the mud. And I'm sorry in advance for all of you, for all the lies that will be told about you as you run these campaigns. So please keep your chin up because what you're doing is so, so, so important. I appreciate it. I think unless Cristian's there and wants to chime in, I'm going to move on to a next question. Cristian, if you're there. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, when you get to Harrisburg, because I'm going to be very positive that you're all going to get to Harrisburg, I'm going to ask you for your #1 priority as a legislator. When you go up there, what would you like to accomplish? And maybe you can tell me why you want that to be your #1 priority. And I'll start with Eleanor on that.
Well, protecting women's rights, I mean, that's the #1 priority, but Joanna McClinton seems to have, has that on track. So I think something new that I would bring would be my perspective as an environmental attorney. Under the Wolf administration, Pennsylvania embraced an exemption to the Solid Waste Management Act, which is something that's being pushed in capitals nationwide. And, a year and a half ago, I think 22 states carved out this exception, and I'll explain in a moment what it is. And currently, I think it's up to 29. So the American Chemistry Council is doing a fabulous job lobbying state governments on behalf of petrochemical companies and promoting a false solution to our plastics crisis that they like to call advanced recycling, and suggesting that we can have a circular economy and just recycle plastic over and over and over. And it is a false solution. Plastic is a petrochemical company, and is a petrochemical, and this technology has never been really used successfully at a commercial scale. So my first thing that I would like to do is just call a moratorium on advanced recycling in Pennsylvania, so that we don't have any facilities trying to, develop on, currently undeveloped parcels and build out useless infrastructure.
Thanks, Eleanor. And that sounds like something really important. And and technical, and I'm glad you have the background in this because I don't. So on my behalf, I appreciate what you know and what you're going to do here. Brad, I'll ask you, what priority would you have up in Harrisburg as a legislator?
So my number one priority, and I've talked to a bunch of people about this, it's fair funding for public schools. I'm sure probably many of you know we are number 41 out of 50 states for education funding in the state of Pennsylvania, which is as bad as it sounds. And the Commonwealth Court sued the state of Pennsylvania and won. So our schools were ruled unconstitutionally underfunded as of last year. I would like to ensure that our schools stay funded because one, it's not fair to homeowners who are on fixed incomes or maybe retired that their school taxes are so high they can't afford to live in their homes anymore. And two, our kids are suffering. They need fully funded public schools. We should have teachers that have good salaries. We should have teachers that have smaller classrooms, and our kids should have breakfast and lunch taken care of. I think that's bare minimum for me, and it's so important that children are able to, get irrespective of whatever their home life is, that they are able to go to school and have a great experience because that's how we send fully functioning adults into our society, and that's incredibly important. So that's my number one.
Thanks, Brad. And as a former teacher, I so believe this is the core fundamental of our entire democracy. If kids don't have the same opportunities, I live here in Delaware County, and we have one hand Chester, which is one of the lowest performing school districts, also lowest funded school districts, and we have Radnor, which is one of the highest in the state. And the disparity is just so obvious, and asking kids to perform when they don't have the same tools as other kids is just, it's not fair and it's not American. It's just not. So thank you for that. Stefanie, your priority as a legislator.
So this is going to be healthcare related. My highest priorities are lowering healthcare costs in any way we can. That could include expanding Medicaid or doing things like what Governor Shapiro passed last year with like breast cancer screenings at no cost to the patients. If we can do it for one type of diagnosis, we can do that for more things. So that would be my priority because healthcare costs are getting extremely out of control.
Healthcare is extremely expensive. As someone who just retired, the amount of money that you pay, even in retirement, is off the charts. And we need to do better. I know President Biden and Vice President Harris did a lot with insulin costs, and we need to move, I think, that competitiveness into the rest of the healthcare industry. So, thank you for your expertise, and thank you for that. Let me see, Megan, your priority as a legislator up in Harrisburg.
Yeah, I hate this question because there's so many things that we all want to do. I'm going to go with something that even a couple of months ago, I wouldn't have considered a priority. But in talking through my persuasion doors, when I announced I was running, I was really clear that I'm running to create a government that works for people like those in my district, working class families. And I'm realizing that the one area I find so much common ground between Republicans, independents, people who vote, people who specifically go out of their way to avoid anything election related, is there's so much institutional power that exists in the government that average people can't access because we don't have term limits. So for me, term limits is huge. I know people don't like to vote themselves out of power. So it's something that I know will be tricky, but I am really up for the fight to establish term limits for state legislative races, for Congress. Anywhere that I can support term limits, I will. And I've also signed a term limits pledge.
I think I signed the same term limits pledge in 2020, and I agree with you that I think, in my opinion, government was never designed to be a lifelong career. And I think that it helps you to have been out in the economy and actually worked another job and see what other people are dealing with when you're up there in Harrisburg. So I concur with you. I don't know if everybody does, but you've got my backing. So thank you for that. Meriam, when you get to Harrisburg, what's a priority for you as a legislator?
Like Megan said, so many. Of course, women's reproductive rights, to make sure that they don't come after IVF and contraception and all of the above. Fairly funding our public schools. My opponent is against that and all of the above. Defending our democracy, defending our freedoms, lowering the cost of living for our hardworking families, and just genuinely being there, because I've been a longtime community organizer, volunteer. I believe in being there and actually listening and being compassionate. I hopefully when I'm there in Harrisburg, I will be representing a purple district. So I promise to be a compassionate voice for everyone in my district and really be there to listen to their issues. I will be there in person at their door and listen to them and hear them and make sure I address their concerns.
Thank you, Miriam. I really appreciate that. I'm going to ask you a question that maybe this is somewhat Trumpian, because I'm going to ask you about what scares you about your opponent and the potential for your opponent winning in the fall. I think, you know, obviously I want you all to win, and I think that is a goal for everybody on this call. But I think too often we don't realize, you know, what are the very negative consequences of your opponent potentially taking office. What's one thing that scares you about you losing this race and your opponent winning? And I don't know if anyone wants to take that as a first. I'm looking for someone who's unmuted.
I'll take it.
Megan, yeah.
I'm so sorry, Stephanie, we keep doing this.
We'll take
For
Stephanie.
me, looking aside of the votes that he would make, the thing that scares me the most about my opponent is that he is so young. I'm super young. So, you know, we have the same thing going where people don't want to believe that we're going to go do bad things or that we already have made bad votes. My opponent offers a lot of legitimacy to the hatred that we see spewed by this MAGA agenda to young people. And when I was in school, that motivated me to run for office, seeing this hatred like breathed into my peers that I grew up with. And I really worry about the influence that it's setting for other younger people to see it legitimized so up close by somebody who they maybe went to school with or who's just a couple years older than them.
So it's not just the fact that he's young, it's the fact what he represents, Megan.
Yeah, exactly. It's that he puts on this moderate facade, but the way that he talks when he has the option to, or the way that, you know, people who are close to him leave those interactions feeling, I think it just sets such a bad standard that we're already seeing on a national level, that I really want to do everything in my power to get out of my district. And, you know, knowing that I have 6 young nephews in this district, I don't want this to be like this personality to be a role model for them.
Thank you. And Stefanie, you had said you'd want to talk about your opponent.
Yeah, so there's 2 things. One is our voting rights. So my opponent is essentially a MAGA Republican. And just in general, the far right has gained far too much political power in this country. And I think probably a motivation for all of us running is that we need to vote out every single MAGA aligned politician out there because they want to drag us back 100 years or more. So I would be concerned about the results of our presidential election being challenged, and all these people will stand up and do that. So, you know, assuming that Kamala wins, we don't need people who are going to try to throw roadblocks and, you know, just try to blow up this election. And the second thing is that he's extremely anti-choice and also voted the same way Meriam's opponent has voted in the past about extreme bans with no exceptions and criminalizing women who have had abortions. And just FYI, it's not just women. We're also talking about like 11, 12, 13-year-old girls being, treated as if they're a murderer. So yeah, his extreme views are very terrifying.
So what you're saying is this is not your grandfather's Republican Party. This is a real MAGA Republican, very right wing, very willing to support another bogus claim on the election should Kamala Harris win.
Yes.
Thank you. I see Brad and then Eleanor.
Right. So I too am in a race against a incumbent MAGA Republican, and he was one of the folks who refused to ratify the previous presidential election results. But he said that his election results were fine, of course. But what I'm scared of is that he has started voting differently for the first time ever since I started running against him. He made a pro-choice vote, and he voted for the fair funding bill. And if you look at his voter history, he's straight Republican Party, straight MAGA all the way. He doesn't really deviate too much, but I think he's a bit scared of me. So he has started changing the way that he votes. I don't know that that's going to fool people, but he has a name recognition advantage, and I am a bit worried about that, although I'm doing everything I can.
Got it. So another MAGA Republican who's trying to change his spots just in time for the election to sway enough voters to win. Yeah. Eleanor.
Yeah, so Megan, you described your opponent as having a facade, the moderate facade, and I think that is a common playbook. I think a lot of Republican incumbents do carry that, but when they're in Harrisburg and they're taking votes, it's extreme. My opponent has a very extreme stance on abortion. She voted to support a prohibition of abortion in the event of fetal abnormality without exception for rape or incest. That is extreme. And I probably say that 3 dozen times a day. She has voted against common sense gun regulation, including voting no to prohibiting bump stocks and switches, which are the devices that you attach to a semi-automatic firearm to enable it to fire in an automatic manner. She was also a state Republican committee person in 2021 when the state Republican Party was advancing the fake elector scheme. She is an absolute danger. So my fear is that I lose.
Thanks, Eleanor. And I'm gonna get Cristian. Cristian's back, and Cristian, we're just talking about one thing that scares you about possibly your opponent winning in November.
Yeah, I do apologize. I did get a call. I had to step away, but the biggest thing that scares me is that he is a seal for the Republican Party. Whatever they need, he's there for. And like I talked earlier about the water authority, that's a huge issue and it's a huge concern. And at the expense of his party, he's willing to exploit my community for that. So I want to get elected to finally resolve this issue and have enough votes in the House and the Senate so that we can keep water in public hands and not for private corporations.
You have a longtime incumbent that you're running against, correct?
Yeah, 7 terms.
So he's been there forever. And one of the tough things you have to do is to counteract his name recognition. So what kind of things are you hearing at the door about the fact that he's been there for so long?
So with Republicans, it's always that a career politician, that word just turns them off. And I'm like, that's who he is at this point. This has been his career. So I do say that a lot. And that's enough for them. Or some people know him so well that they roll their eyes and they're like, finally, someone willing to step up against him. So I do get both. I do get some people who he appears to be moderate, and being the forefront leader on a lot of these issues. But I talk about his votes and I talk about what he's actually done in office. And people are surprised that he plays a game and acts differently. So it's something, luckily he's been there for so long, I have enough room to show the proof that he's not really walking the talk.
Thank you, Cristian. I think, Meriam, did I get you yet? I'm not sure.
No, yeah, so wanting to overthrow the elections in Pennsylvania is very scary. Voting against reproductive rights with no exceptions whatsoever is extremely scary. Voting for mandatory funerals for fetal remains with no options for families to even opt out of it is a grave overreach of government authority and scary because it can be very traumatic and personal. Not funding our public schools is scary because that puts our children and teachers at a disadvantage. And the other thing I just wanted to point out is not only are these things scary, but it's not far-fetched. It can actually become a huge nightmare for Pennsylvania because we only have a 1-seat majority. And that's a very fragile majority to have for us to go into this awful direction. And so it's critical to expand that majority. We need all of us there to protect our rights, to make sure that we are not handing over, our rights and freedoms to these people. So losing 1 seat, 2 seats, and not expanding our majority where we're safe, is a very real, God forbid, nightmare that can happen.
It is a nightmare, and thank you for sharing that, Meriam. We're gonna hope that all of you win in November so that we can prevent the scourge of some of these MAGA right-wing people who purport to be moderate winning up in Harrisburg. We cannot let that happen. I want to get to a final question, which really is just a summary for each one of you. This is got a recording that we're going to put online. Hopefully a lot of people are going to see this. I know we had a pretty good crowd here tonight, but if there's one thing that you want to communicate to people about why they should support your race, I guess that's the question I want to ask all of you. I think, people live their lives. They've got a lot of things going on. I know today, just alone, I think I got 30 Kamala Harris texts asking me for money, and also texts from other people like Sherrod Brown. But you all are in people's backyards. This is Pennsylvania. We are ground zero for the entire presidential election, but also ground zero for so many important issues facing us here in the state. I'm going to ask each one of you just to share a little bit about why people should support your race and support ChangePA to make sure that we win. And I think I'll start with Stefanie.
So for my specific race, to be honest, I have been busting my butt since the beginning of the year raising money. We have enough to roll out a pretty robust direct mail program, but we also want to have a very robust digital program. And so that's where we need to raise another, many, many thousands. But it will help drive the turnout because up the ballot in Pennsylvania, if all the Democrats turn out who are registered, we're going to win everything. So the more we can do to drive turnout, it's going to win our races. It's going to win all of our other important congressional, Senate, and the presidential race. If we do our jobs turning people out, she's going to win Pennsylvania and she's going to win the entire election.
Thanks, Stefanie. Megan, why should people support you in this great endeavor?
Yeah, because I can win. Like I said, I come from a field background. I've been working on campaigns. Flipping seats like this is literally what I've been doing for the past multiple years. I wouldn't have put my life on the line, put my life on hold if I didn't look at the numbers and say, this is a seat that I know for a fact I can win. So I understand that people see, you know, a 10% margin from a previous year and they're like, whoa, that's crazy. Me with my field brain, I'm like, a 10% margin, we can tackle that and we can make that up on the doors. So right now I have one of the strongest field programs in my region because field is my passion. Talking to voters is my passion, and I really excel at conversations on the doors. Anything that could help me spend more time on the doors is just going to bring me that much closer to flipping the seat and turning Luzerne County back into the Democratic stronghold that it once was. And that's something that we really can do. So any support would be huge in helping us do that.
Thanks, Megan. We appreciate it. Brad, why should people support your race?
So it's by the numbers, one of the most competitive races in the state, and I'm on the cusp of turning the county purple for the first time in history. That means a lot for a lot of people. Fair funding for public schools, single payer health care, affordable housing. These are things that I would have the ability to weigh in on the state level. It could change people's lives forever. Pennsylvania could become the best state. It could be a utopia. And I know that we have the capacity to do so. I would love to spend most of my time on the doors, like so many have said, but we all have fundraising obligations that we have to meet. And you can't, pay your campaign manager and your staff and your volunteers if you've got paid canvassers if you don't have the money to continue. And I'm close. I'm 4 points down. It's a field margin. I think I can do it. I know that I can do it. I just need help from the community, and I'm hoping that you all can do that for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eleanor, why should people support your race?
The 143rd is completely flippable this year. I can feel it on the doors when I'm talking to the voters. In 2022, Shapiro won the district with 54%. And in 2023, we flipped the two school boards, Penridge and Central Bucks, making national news on both. And the two Democratic commissioners in Bucks County also were able to win their second term together. I know that when I'm able to get my message in front of voters, it is compelling to them. We all know abortion rights is a major issue. The 143rd is no exception to that. I'm raising money for a robust direct mail campaign and kind of paid communications, whatever I can afford. I have kind of the, put it together with duct tape budget, and then kind of my mid-range budget, and then my Cadillac budget. I've leaned on my personal and professional network pretty heavily with fundraising, and they have been very supportive. I think that has gotten attention of stakeholders who are watching this race, among many others within the state. The reality is, I just need more money to pay for paid communications. When I get my message in front of voters, they respond to it. I need to define myself very early with two mailers, and then follow it up by exposing her for the extremist that she is.
Thank you, Eleanor. Meriam, why should people support your campaign and make sure that you win?
I'm working very, very hard, knocking doors. My campaign has knocked over 9,000 doors, and we are hoping to double that and ramp that up even more. We want to make sure we get to every single door as much as we possibly can. I do need more funds in order to have a more extensive mail program, and we want to make sure that we get our message across to everyone in my district to make sure they know of the extreme votes of my opponent, and we are able to get that message across. I do believe this will hopefully be the year of the Democratic woman. So I do believe that, we can do this. And I am feeling it at the doors as well. There is momentum, there's excitement. People are, resonating with our platform. We just need more funds, and with funds, we can win. So we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Meriam. And finally, Cristian, why should people support your race?
I'm going to echo a lot what everyone has said, but with a little twist, if I win, I will make some history down in Chester County, being the first Latino Gen Z candidate to represent the southern part. So we'll make history at the top of the ticket, and I think we should make it at the bottom as well. Based off of what my poll said, Democrat versus Republican, it's within 5 points. When people heard my story and my background and the endorsement of the police, I was at 61% more likely to vote for me. When they heard my opponent's stance on abortion and how radical he is on that extreme end, it was about 60% less likely to vote for him. And more Republicans did my poll than Democrats. So it gave us a good signal what our messaging should be for the rest of the campaign. Also, the Inquirer released an article saying that the suburbs is what could lead the ticket for Harris, and Chester County is a part of that. We have a lot of people who moved out from Philly. My district is actually used to be one of the most affordable ones, where it attracted a lot of people from the city to come move out to the farmlands. And while I'm knocking on the southern part of my district, we get a lot of people who are newly moved from Maryland and Delaware. So there's a lot of new residents here and a lot of people that could help us push me forward to win. We just need to meet all the voters where we can, whether it's at the mail, it's on the phone, or in a text, in an email, and all of that takes money. I hate this part of the campaign, but we do have to fundraise a lot so we can make sure that, we flip this seat.
Thank you, Cristian. And thanks to all our candidates tonight for being here and talking so openly and candidly about their campaigns. And thank all of you for being part of this Change PA night with our candidates. We are so proud to represent and to host this event and to have a candidate cohort. Change PA has raised over the last several election cycles over $1.5 million for state house candidates. And we feel like we've been an integral part of flipping the state house from red to blue, but we need to keep it blue. If you haven't given already, please look at our link in the chat. We also have a website, ChangePA, where you can see our candidates in action. Unfortunately, we had a video to show you tonight, which kind of didn't work due to some technical difficulties, but this has been a great evening. We fully support these candidates because we believe the future of Pennsylvania are these young people who are going to re-energize not just their own districts, but up and down the ballot so that we flip the presidency from the current state. It's still blue, but we want to keep it blue and make sure that Kamala Harris is the next president and the first woman president of the United States. Thank you all for being here. And if anyone has any questions, I didn't get many questions in the chat, but shoot an email over to ChangePA. We'd be glad to answer them for you. Thank you so much, candidates. Take care and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deb. You did such a terrific job hosting, and thank you to all of these candidates, these terrific candidates, for being here tonight. And we're really rooting for you, and I know a lot of people who are here tonight are real hardcore supporters. And so this is a great group for you to have been able to talk to.
And I would be remiss, I forgot to acknowledge Tom Lincoln for doing a great job technically and presenting this event to you tonight. So thanks, Tom. And we look forward to seeing you again at the next Change PA event. Take care.